the aspiration of our country to build a $5 trillion economy is going to depend upon our ability to invest in higher education and to focus on building world-class universities. The human capacity, the human capability, and also the human development capacities that universities have will be significantly enhanced if we can improve quality and also focus on research and knowledge creation in our universities. The fact that we have established institutions of eminence which have been identified as part of the Government of India's process is a first step in the right direction, but we need to move beyond that. We need to now focus on how do we build world-class universities, how do we create research ecosystem, how do we invest in higher education. So one of the ways by which we have been able to create world-class universities around the world is to invest in higher education and significantly enhancing the GDP investment relating to higher education. The benefit of that is we can have an economy and institutions that can shape the economy through better human capital emerging out of our universities.
Administrator and parent for more than 6 decades, sort of preparing and thinking about what I would say this afternoon. I came up with this, and that's a major part of my life has been affiliated with universities. And I thought deeply about them. And I am absolutely convinced that a quality education is the single most important factor in assuring social mobility, social progress, and prosperity. That is true in the United States, and I think it is equally true in India. And just as a note, I mean, I've lived in California now for more or less 3 decades, and I arrived at the dawn of the knowledge economy, the burgeoning of the knowledge economy at Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley is a concept, it's not a geographical location as such. And Berkeley, which is across the bay from the Silicon Valley, sort of partakes in that. And to watch the growth of Silicon Valley and the growth of the computer industry, and largely as a result of what was going on at Stanford and Berkeley, is just quite extraordinary. And there's no reason that can't be duplicated and improved upon elsewhere. I think I'm going to just sit down, answer questions, listen to your questions. One of my earlier jobs also was I was a press secretary to the mayor of New York, so I'm familiar with press conferences too. Thanks.
Most people have not recognized this, that today in India, over 70% of higher education is actually private sector, both in terms of private higher education institutions and private universities. And 70% of the students in India are also studying in private higher education institutions. This has been there has been a tectonic shift in the growth and evolution of higher education sector in India, where the higher education sector is dominated both in terms of number of institutions and number of students studying in these institutions by the private sector. I'm not saying it's a good thing. What I really want to say is that this has resulted in significant consequences for the sector itself. We need to create a better ecosystem in which private, not-for-profit type elements in the higher education sector come in. That's one of the 10-point agenda, but it requires a better understanding of the role of the private sector in higher education. The fourth, I think it's very important, is that we really, I think the question of jobs is at the heart and center of higher education. The aspiration of young people who go into universities is a very serious issue. You have a situation where over 60 to 70% of our engineers are unemployed. There are numerous engineering colleges and management colleges and other colleges getting closed across the country. The aspiration of Indian students to be able to receive good quality education and then get a job is being affected. So jobs and careers are at the heart and center of the higher education problem. And that also is connected with our aspiration to build a $5 trillion economy, because we need to invest in entrepreneurship, we need to invest in social innovation, we need to invest, as the government talks about, startups and the ecosystem for development of startups. But honestly, this can happen only in higher education institutions themselves. Despite the best of intentions, both corporations as well as government agencies are not suitable to create this environment. It has to be created within academic institutions, higher education institutions, colleges across the country, as well as universities, and we need to play a leadership role there. And lastly, one of the things that we need to recognize is the role of higher education and universities in the larger, agenda of nation building. In this case, we should mention that universities have to play a leadership role, not only in building a $5 trillion economy, and I strongly believe we simply cannot build that economy without significantly investing in higher education, but we also need to recognize the role played by universities in issues addressing humanities and social sciences. I've always been concerned by the fact that many of India's higher education imagination has been largely focused on STEM and to some extent in medicine, but we have to a large extent neglected. Policy has talked about it. We need to invest in aspects of developing the higher education sector with a stronger focus on humanities and social sciences, and that is something which we hope we can see in the future. So these are some of the things which I want to share with you. I'll be happy to take questions, but before I do that, I would like to introduce my colleague, Professor Tom Goldstein. Tom Goldstein is the Dean of the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. He was before the Dean of the Columbia School of Journalism, which is in New York, and also the Dean of the University of California, Berkeley School of Journalism. Quite remarkably, he was a member of the Pulitzer Prize Board, which is like the Nobel Prize for journalists and the media. He served as a member of the Pulitzer Prize Board. He used to work for New York Times and Wall Street Journal. There are very few people like him in the world who have started across the world of media and academia, and have assumed a leadership role today in India as the Dean of the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. I have requested him to share some of his own experiences from his American higher education. He graduated from Yale University and Columbia University, so he has studied and worked in distinguished institutions, which I think can help us understand some of the challenges that we are facing, but hopefully to draw inspiration from institutions in other parts of the world, including in the United States.